Time does not pass through us. Rather, we are melting within it. Stephen King's book, The Scrat Post, is a daring attempt to illuminate life's greatest mystery: how we perceive, utilize, and often squander the one irreplaceable resource, time. Combining neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and everyday anecdotes, the work offers an approach that is both rigorous and deeply human to this seemingly familiar concept. So, if time is not merely the silent minute hand ticking across a clock face, but a current fashioned by our own minds, then the most terrifying question isn't how many years we have left to live, but how much we have truly lived within that allotted time. Part 1: The Experience of Time. I once thought I understood time until I stepped into a deep underground cave. It was a place that seemed to exist outside the rhythms of the world above, where only the sound of dripping water and thick darkness prevailed. There, the notion of day and night vanished. I realized that what we usually take for granted, the ticking of a clock, precise hours and minutes, is merely a thin sheet of ice separating us from an endless ocean of different ways to experience time. I recall Mr. Cipher, a 23-year-old who, in the summer of 1962, ventured into an ice cave in the Alps. He brought food, a tent, and some essentials, but no watch. He wanted to know what would happen when there were no more days and nights, when nothing happened for weeks on end. Hundreds of meters beneath the mountains, he lived in darkness, with only a faint flashlight occasionally guiding his way. A small spider he had befriended as a companion eventually died, leaving him utterly alone. Time passed unconsciously. Cipher called his support team above to report his daily schedule. He believed only an hour had passed since he woke up, but it had actually been 4 or 5. He thought he'd napped for 10 minutes, but in reality, he'd slept for over 8 hours. His familiar rhythm dissolved. In that darkness, he felt both motionless and dragged along by an invisible current. When he was pulled out of the cave after 61 days, he was astonished to realize he had lost 25 days from his memory. Later, Cipher repeated the experiment, always yielding the same result. The human body maintains its own rhythm, approximately 24.5 hours a day. This is our biological clock, an innate rhythm we cannot resist. Hundreds of students in experiments in Munich showed similar results. Their days naturally lengthened, making them feel as if they had lost several days when returning to the normal world. This proves a dual truth. Within us, there always exists an astonishingly precise rhythm. The biological clock might deviate by mere minutes over a lifetime, yet in parallel, our consciousness creates another kind of time, internal time. These two types of time do not coincide. Cipher's body maintained a perfect rhythm, but his consciousness was disoriented, creating an irreconcilable gap. The question then arises, why can't we consciously read this biological clock? Our bodies can regulate blood pressure, secrete hormones, make us sleepy or alert with almost perfect accuracy, but our consciousness doesn't perceive this directly. To measure an hour, we rely on memory, comparing it to previous experiences. Thus, an hour in a doctor's waiting room can stretch endlessly, while an hour on a layover flight feels fleeting. We depend on memory for judgment, and it is memory itself that makes time so fragile. It turns out the present moment never stands still. Every cell in our body has its own clock. Scientists proved this by implanting bioluminescent genes from fireflies into fruit flies. Each fruit fly cell glowed rhythmically, demonstrating that every cell carries a clock. Humans are no different, trillions of cells, each capable of measuring time. But if they all ran independently, they would quickly fall out of sync. Therefore, in the brain, there's a tiny command center located in the hypothalamus, the size of a grain of rice, yet it controls everything. When morning light penetrates our eyelids, this center receives signals and resets the biological clock. Light is the conductor for this enormous orchestra. Without it, everything drifts out of alignment. That's why night shift workers or those living without natural light often suffer from disorders, insomnia, depression, and reduced effectiveness. Light is what connects our internal clock to the rhythm of the universe. And it is this rhythm that creates a fundamental difference between people. Some wake up full of energy at sunrise, while others are most alert at midnight. We call them early birds and night owls. This difference isn't merely habit, it's encoded in our genes. Young children often wake at dawn, teenagers become night owls, and the elderly gradually return to an early rhythm. Even our ability to concentrate, our patience, our tolerance levels, or the timing of sexual activity follow this biological rhythm. It's strange that we live our entire lives under the control of this rhythm, yet we are almost completely unaware of it. We only know if we're alert or tired, excited or sluggish, rarely realizing that everything follows an invisible schedule. But the moment we live against our biological rhythm, our body and mind erode, much like Balzac, the literary genius, who pushed himself to exhaustion with his habit of writing through the night, only to die young at 51. There's a truth we rarely consider. Every moment we live is measured by our brain with an invisible beat. The musician Ravel, when composing Bolero, inadvertently revealed how internal time operates. The melody repeats, slowly building, immersing the listener in a hypnotic sensation as if each moment stretches into infinity. It is in these repetitions that we realize the brain uses movement to calculate time. Without movement, we lose the brain's ability to estimate. A series of small counters operate simultaneously, like a complex orchestra. When we walk, our footsteps become a measure. When we cook, the aroma and the progress of the dish are the clock. Imagine cooking a stew. You know that when that specific aroma rises, about an hour has passed internal time. Thus, time is not a straight line but a network of countless signals. Each signal is an instrument creating a prolonged symphony in our minds. But this system is fragile. When we wait anxiously, a few minutes can stretch into agony. When we are absorbed in joy, hours vanish like a mere instant. Time can fly like a bird or crawl like a broken-down car. This is not due to the clock on the wall, but to the brain, where breath, heart rate, attention, and emotions regulate each moment. Then another question arises: how long does the present truly last? We often believe we are living in the now. But in reality, consciousness is always a beat behind the real world. When a mosquito flaps its wings, when a flash of light appears, the brain needs a few milliseconds to process it. What we call the present is merely a moment already past. Furthermore, experiments show that the brain bundles many tiny fragments into a present moment, lasting about 3 seconds. That's why when listening to music, we perceive a continuous melody, not discrete notes. But this also means that the present we live in is an illusion, stitched together. Consciousness always lags behind actual events, as if we're watching a pre-edited film. This explains why we often recall a conversation for a moment, then realize the brain tweaked it during storage. We are both audience and director, restaging the present just as it fleetingly passes. Ironically, most of our lives pass in a state of forgotten moments. The mind often operates on autopilot. We walk down the street without noticing our steps. We talk without remembering the content. Like a pilot switching on autopilot, we let our consciousness wander, and time passes without leaving a trace. Sometimes, only a shock, an unexpected event, jolts us, making us realize we've lost a significant chunk of our lives. However, memory is the anchor that holds us in this flow. Memory doesn't just store, it creates the very nature of time. Without memory, we have no past, no future. We exist only in the present moment. Patients with severe amnesia live in a loop, where every day is the first time. They cannot accumulate experiences or imagine what is to come. Memory transforms the present into history and vice versa. It also edits history to fit what we want to believe. Each time we recall, a memory is rewritten, added to, or subtracted from like a painting with layers of paint. That's why time in our minds is never fixed. Childhood can become a vast, endless stretch, while old age makes many years flash by in the blink of an eye. As we grow older, new experiences gradually diminish. The brain makes fewer new imprints, so later years are compressed into a brief sequence in memory. That's why 7 years in middle age can feel as short as a moment. A paradox emerges. The longer we live, the faster time seems to go. The fewer new experiences we have, the more compressed our memories become. This is the rule that makes people, even if they live a long, drawn-out life, still feel that time is too short. Time, as we perceive it, is not the steady flow reported by a clock. It expands and contracts, compresses or stretches, depending on how we pay attention. Remember 2 minutes with your hand on a hot stove? It feels longer than a lifetime, whereas 2 hours with a loved one are as brief as a breath. Albert Einstein once joked about this to illustrate relativity, but in reality, this is everyone's daily experience. Our breath, heart rate, and physical state become the threads that lengthen or shorten moments. In a state of anxiety, breathing is short and rapid. The brain receives many small signals, making the moment seem interminable. Conversely, when relaxed, breathing is deep and even, the brain receives fewer signals and time shortens. Criminals describe how, in the act of committing a crime, a few seconds can stretch endlessly. This very sensation etches every detail into memory. Conversely, we also know that joy passes so quickly it's hard to grasp. The strange thing is that the brain has the ability to slow down time when we know how to savor it. When we actively prolong a moment by paying attention to every detail, breathing deeply so our eyes and ears register more, time seems to slow down. Conversely, when we let our attention wander, it vanishes quickly. Then another question arises: does the present truly exist? Physicists have shown that now is merely an illusion. The universe has no singular fixed point to mark the present, it's just a small part of a continuous flow. Meanwhile, our consciousness is a beat behind the world. When we hear thunder, the lightning flash actually occurred moments before. When we read a word, our eyes have already scanned it, and the brain is reconstructing it. What we call now is always a little late. Our brain groups disparate events into a block, much like watching a movie where a sequence of still images projected continuously creates movement. Our present is also a product of synthesis. An experimental airplane can read human thoughts by analyzing brain waves a few seconds before we actually act. This means that consciousness is not only slow, but also not the origin of action. It merely receives a report after a decision has been made. It's astonishing. We live in a continuous illusion, believing we are in the present, but that present has already passed by the time we perceive it. And so, memory becomes the foundation not just for storage. Memory is also the framework that shapes time. We think we remember the past, but in reality, each time we recall, we rewrite it. Fragments are changed, details erased or embroidered. Memory, therefore, doesn't just record time, it creates a new time. Some people lose their memory, living in an eternal present. They cannot connect yesterday with today, having no concept of tomorrow. This is clear proof that humans are the architects of time. We don't just live in time, we create it. And here, the discrepancy becomes even clearer. Children live in a wide-open flow, each day filled with countless new experiences. A summer in childhood feels as long as a lifetime, but as we grow older, new experiences decrease. The brain has less new information to store, and thus, years short. We look back at 10 years of youth and find them long and full of detail. But 10 years of adulthood become only a few vague memories. That's why old age surprises us with how quickly time flies. Somewhere in the brain, there's a threshold for moments. In childhood, this threshold is low, so every new detail becomes a memory landmark, making time feel longer. The older we get, the fewer surprises and time compresses. In an experiment, giving a child a new teddy bear makes time feel longer in their minds. Adults, with their accustomed brains, experience the same amount of time as much shorter. All of this leads to a profound realization. Time is a product of the brain. It is elastic, distorted. It can be long or short depending on how we live. When we live unconsciously, time is neglected. How many times have you been in a conversation where your mind wandered off somewhere, only to utter a few disconnected pleasantries? Or when you walked down a familiar street, suddenly realizing you had arrived at your destination without remembering the journey. Those moments leave no trace in memory, and thus they vanish from our lives. We live, but it's as if we don't truly live. Just 3 minutes of mindful presence in the present can create a sense of eternity. This may sound trivial, but it proves that the quality of time depends on our presence. If we let our minds chase countless thoughts, the moment blurs. But if we know how to pause, time expands. Then we see memory emerge like a frozen river. Without it, we couldn't distinguish yesterday from today, nor have any concept of tomorrow. Many types of memories coexist. Some are fleeting like fragments, others enduring like milestones. It is through the continuous transformation of the present into memory that we gain a sense of the flow of time. But memory is never absolutely truthful. It's like a patched-up house where each time we enter, a piece of wood is replaced, a wall repainted. People who lose the ability to form new memories, like patient HM in medical history, are trapped in an eternal present. They cannot recount events that happened minutes ago, they cannot envision tomorrow. Their world is as blank as a sheet of paper. Looking at them, we understand that it is memory itself that allows us to have a past and a future. Memory can also be edited to suit our emotions and desires. Painful memories are dulled, while sweet memories are polished. We don't just store, we recreate, like a photographer retouching a picture. We unconsciously add or omit details, making what we call the past a processed version. And thus, life is never an objective sequence of events, but a narrative edited by ourselves. The perception of time changing with age also stems from memory. A child has countless new things to learn, each day brimming with strong impressions, so time seems to stretch. Conversely, adults have fewer new experiences. Memory only records what is familiar, compressing many years into a brief sequence. Therefore, childhood can feel eternal, but old age is merely a fleeting breeze. The teddy bear experiment clearly demonstrates this. When children play with new objects, they perceive a longer duration of time. Their brains make stronger imprints. Adults, already familiar with the world, experience the same duration as much shorter. New experiences act as a brake, slowing down time. Repetition speeds it up. This explains why a journey to an unfamiliar place always feels longer than the journey back, even if the distance is the same. The first time, the brain has to process a myriad of new details. When returning, everything is familiar, causing us to overlook details, and thus, time is compressed. And then, as we cross midlife, we begin to feel pushed towards the end of the race. The sensation of time shortening is not just due to memory, but also because our bodies change. The brain gradually becomes less flexible, and new memories are harder to etch. We live more by habit and less by discovery. And so, each year is swallowed up in an instant. There are special places where years seem to stand still, as in the spiritual life of certain communities or religions, where a simple, repetitive rhythm turns time into a circle. But in modern society, that feeling is rare. The older we get, the faster we feel pulled towards the end. A paradox compels us to pause and reflect. Time on a clock always runs steadily, but the time we live is never aligned with it. When we are absorbed in captivating moments, a few hours vanish without a trace. When we are trapped in waiting, each minute drags like a heavy anchor. This discrepancy is proof that there are two kinds of time, one belonging to the physical world and one belonging to the human mind. A mechanical clock only counts the present beat, but consciousness carries both the past and the future. Each memory is a frozen piece of time. Each intention is a bridge to what has not yet happened. We can journey back to childhood with a single memory or project ourselves into the future with a dream. In these acts, we break the linear rules of clock time and create our own dimension of time. Time can also be bent by emotion. When pain is prolonged, each second seems multiplied. When happy, it contracts. This disparity allows people to simultaneously lament that time is endlessly long and complain that life is fleeting. Both contradictory statements are true, as both stem from subjective experience. Researchers have shown that the brain has a natural limit in processing the present. The now moment actually lasts only a few seconds. Beyond that limit, it has already become memory. Thus, we never truly grasp the present. The moment we think we are living in this second, it has already slipped into the past. The present is merely an illusion created by the brain continuously piecing together discrete fragments into a flow. Therefore, memory holds supreme importance. We don't just store, we reconstruct the past. Each experience is rearranged, added to, or subtracted from to fit our view of the world. People might recall a painful event with fewer details than reality, or a happy memory with more vibrant colors. Memory isn't always truthful, but it is the sole foundation for feeling that we have lived. If memory is lost, as in neurological cases, the entire sense of time also vanishes. Life becomes a series of disconnected moments, unlinked, leading nowhere. We see that humans are the architects of time, and memory is the primary material. Time is also adjusted by age. Childhood is a period where every day is a new world. Each time a word or concept is learned, the brain makes strong imprints, making that period feel longer. As we mature, we repeat many familiar behaviors. The brain stores less new information, memory compresses, and years fly by. Therefore, childhood seems endless while old age is fleeting. There is a reality that makes everyone uneasy. The the older we get, the more time seems to short. People suddenly realize that a year at age 50 is just a blink of an eye, while a year at age 10 is an entire era. This is not because clocks run faster, but because the brain has changed how it records memories. Fewer novelties mean fewer markers to differentiate, and time becomes a smooth block that slips away. In the final years of life, we try to slow this flow. Many seek to live slower, focusing on details, hoping time will stop rushing. But the truth is, the flow never stops. Only when we change our way of life, create new experiences, and pay attention to the present can time expand again. Looking back, it's clear that our entire life isn't simply governed by clock hands. We live in two parallel layers of time, one measured by precise machinery and one arising from internal perception. This section, Part I, clearly shows that internal time dictates how we live, remember, and age. Think of a journey. At the start, everything is new. Scenery strikes the eye, every detail, the road seems endless. But on the return journey, along the same path, the brain is accustomed. It overlooks many things, shortening the return trip. That is the rule of experience. The less novelty, the more time contracts. The brain has a threshold for moments. In childhood, this threshold is low, so every detail becomes a memory milestone, lengthening time. In adulthood, this threshold is high. Truly distinct events are needed to be recorded. Similar days are compressed into a vague blur. This is why old age often brings the feeling of time passing uncontrollably fast. And when we look deeper, we see that we are the architects of our own temporal life. Memory can be altered, the present always lags behind reality, and the future is merely imagination. But in this fragility, we still have the power to shape how we experience. A day can pass like the wind or stretch like a novel, depending on our level of presence. A clock knows nothing of joy or pain, but the brain does. A clock cares not for memories, but we live by them. A clock measures 1 hour exactly like any other, but in the mind, an hour can be as long as a year or shorter than a breath. This section, Part I, reveals a fundamental truth. There is no objective time governing all of human life. We carry within us multiple biological and conscious clocks, each running at its own pace. When morning light touches our eyes, our body synchronizes. When we are immersed in good music, the brain measures each moment by rhythm. When we recall a memory, we travel back to a time that no longer exists. These discoveries not only shake our belief in the absolute nature of the clock, but also give us a new perspective. We can shape our experience of time by shifting our attention, creating new experiences, and living in harmony with our biological rhythms. Otherwise, we will be caught in the illusion that life is too short, when in fact, the problem lies in how we experience each moment. Time is not just a backdrop, it is the fabric we weave our lives with. Only those who recognize this can truly live. Part 2, Using Time. The feeling of being caught in a whirlwind of speed isn't a unique affliction of the internet age. Nearly 200 years ago, West lamented that the world was becoming so fast that no one had time to reflect. That observation hasn't aged. On the contrary, it perfectly mirrors our lives today. It seems the more modern we become, the more obsessed we are with accelerating. But the big question remains: how much speed can the human body and mind endure before breaking? We delight when cars go faster, when news arrives instantly, when our schedules are packed with no room to spare. Yet, the line between exhilaration and exhaustion is perilously thin. Since the advent and widespread use of mechanical clocks, they haven't just measured time, they've become a measure of morality. In the 18th century, a pocket watch was not merely a timekeeping device, but a symbol of trustworthiness and punctuality. People began to be bound by the rhythm of the clock hands, and from then on, tardiness was considered a fault. Society generated invisible pressures forcing everyone to run faster. The irony is that the more we try to save time, the more we lose it. People attempt to multitask, pushing themselves to accelerate in every activity. But speed doesn't always bring efficiency. The body and brain have biological limits. When exceeded, performance drops, concentration shatters, and a sense of helplessness descends. Science has proven that 3 factors make us constantly feel a lack of time: difficulty concentrating, stress, and chronic fatigue, with scattered attention playing the leading role. Our brain is like an intention manager, constantly choosing among countless signals from the world and from our own inner self. Each decision consumes energy, making us tired. To-do lists and meticulous plans may seem to help us gain control, but in reality, they are powerless against the complexity of real life. Imagine a sushi chef. He stands before dozens of types of fish, vegetables, rice, and spices. If he had to mentally list everything, he would be overwhelmed. But in reality, his brain processes automatically, focusing on the right moment, the right movement, the right dish. He knows when to slice, when to roll, when to serve. The brain's attention doesn't follow a checklist but the flow of work. Our brain is the same. It doesn't operate like a computer but like an improvising artist. But precisely because of this, it's easily distracted. Just a small signal, a phone ring, a message, a fleeting thought is enough to pull attention away from work. And each time we lose focus, we need time to get back on track, disrupting the flow. That's why we often find time shrinking, work piling up, and the feeling of lacking time increasing. Beyond difficulty concentrating, acceleration also brings stress. We're not simply stressed by having too much to do, but by constantly facing the clock. Every time we see the second hand tick by, we feel we're falling behind. This creates a specific type of stress, time pressure. Unlike stress caused by accidents or major events, time pressure gradually erodes us, causing our hearts to race, our breath to shorten, and our minds to become chaotic. Yet, more work doesn't always equate to stress. Studies show that the feeling of control is what truly matters. A person can work from morning till night and remain healthy, as long as they feel they are actively making choices. Conversely, merely being forced into a rigid schedule, even with a moderate workload, can lead to exhaustion. This is why many societies are experimenting with new ways of allocating time. Some companies pay based on objectives rather than hours, allowing employees to decide when and how to complete their work. Some cities design flexible childcare and social services so parents aren't bound by rigid timeframes. The result: increased satisfaction and a reduction in the feeling of time scarcity. However, we also realize that mastering time isn't just a policy matter, but also lies in internal motivation. When we have clear goals, guided by positive emotions about the future, we can sustain focus and energy. When goals are vague, we easily give in to instant gratification, and time slips away. Neuroscientists call these future-oriented emotions somatic markers, signals in the body that make us feel eager or apprehensive, thereby guiding our decisions. If a future reward is vivid enough, the body will create a positive response that helps us persevere. If the future is blurry, we disregard it and choose short-term pleasure. Therefore, the art of mastering time is the art of making the future clear and appealing in the present moment. The perception of time is distorted not only by work, but also by social relationships. When we live in a network constantly demanding responses, calls, emails, messages, appointments, we fall into a state researchers call permanent partial attention. Each interruption, though small, cumulatively becomes an endless stream. The consequence is the erosion of personal time. We always feel we have no room to breathe. An easily observable example is the change in work culture. In the 19th century, workers clocked out and left the factory. The rest of the day belonged to them. Today, with smartphones, the boundary between work and rest has almost disappeared. Private time is dissolved into the workflow, making the feeling of time scarcity persistent. To cope, many choose multitasking, doing one thing while doing another. But multitasking is actually an illusion. The brain cannot process two complex streams simultaneously. It merely switches back and forth very quickly between them. And each switch causes us to lose focus, leading to lower efficiency and increased stress. The result is that we spend more time instead of saving it. Many studies show that the feeling of happiness doesn't depend directly on the volume of work, but on the ability to enter a state of flow, a state of deep concentration where one forgets time itself. In that state, everything flows. The challenge is just enough to be engaging but not so difficult as to cause frustration. Paradoxically, we don't clearly perceive time then, but looking back, we see that period was filled with meaning. Thus, the issue isn't how much time we have, but how we use it. Those who live in flow often feel days are longer, while those constantly interrupted find days compressed. So, to gain more time, the right path isn't to speed up, but to re-establish the conditions for entering flow. Here, motivation plays a core role. Each time we face a decision, our body sends signals: heart racing, palms sweating, a feeling of restlessness or excitement. These reactions are not random, they are the body's language helping us shape our choices. Science calls them somatic markers, bodily imprints. They are the bridge between past memories and future actions. For example, someone who has missed an important deadline will carry that memory as a somatic marker. The next time they encounter a similar situation, their body will send a warning signal, making them more cautious. Conversely, a successful memory will leave a feeling of exhilaration, encouraging us to continue the chosen path. This somatic imprint explains why some people can persevere with long-term goals while others easily give up. If the future doesn't evoke present emotion, it becomes vague and cannot compete with instant gratification. Therefore, an important art of living is learning to make the future vivid, so it knocks on the door of our present emotions. Once a future goal is linked to strong emotions, we will find time more expansive. Instead of being caught in a spiral of not having enough hours, we feel we have space to move forward. At that moment, time is no longer an escaping enemy but an ally, a current we can glide upon. But there's another enemy that makes us waste time: procrastination. Almost everyone has experienced having important work to do but choosing smaller activities to avoid it. The brain favors immediate rewards, so it easily falls into diversions while big tasks are pushed aside. Procrastination creates the illusion that we have more time, but in reality, it causes more stress as deadlines approach. Procrastination is not just a bad habit, but the result of a tug-of-war in the brain. On one side is the emotional system, favoring short-term rewards. On the other is the rational region, knowing that long-term goals are more important. When emotions overwhelm, we procrastinate. Only when reason finds a way to breathe life into the future, transforming a dry task into something meaningful and emotional, can we break the cycle. Procrastination is often associated with guilt. We know we are wasting time but continue anyway. This creates a vicious cycle. The more guilty we feel, the more we try to escape, causing work to pile up further. Psychologists call this the procrastination trap, a self-sustaining mechanism where the fear of failure drives us further away from important tasks. The way out is not self-reproach, but changing our perspective on the task. By breaking a task into smaller, clear, and rewardable steps, the brain finds it easier to engage. Instead of having to swallow the whole elephant, we just need small bites. This helps the brain link the work to short-term rewards, breaking the allure of procrastination. Alongside this, another important factor shaping our perception of time is self-control. People who cultivate this ability by delaying small gratifications to achieve larger goals tend to be more successful, not just in their careers, but also in their health and relationships. Self-control is like a brake that helps us regulate our pace on life's journey, preventing us from being carried away by fleeting impulses. However, self-control isn't continuous suppression. The brain needs rewards to maintain motivation. If we are too strict, we will soon burn out and fall back into procrastination. The trick here lies in creating a rhythmic system, knowing when to push, when to relax, and when to rest to regenerate energy. Time also carries a deep imprint of emotion. We can vividly remember a day full of joyful and sorrowful events, while an entire calm month might vanish from memory. This reflects a rule: time only becomes lived time when it is linked to emotion. Without emotion, memories fade and life is compressed. This truth reveals a paradox. Sometimes, it is precisely moments of stress and suffering that make life feel denser. In danger, every second seems to lengthen, every sense sharpens. The brain records details, and looking back later, that period feels like an era, while peaceful days pass by, leaving almost no trace. This explains why many people seek out risky, even painful challenges. Not because they enjoy pain, but because they want to live in the dense flow of time. Extreme experiences, whether positive or negative, have the power to etch time into memory, making life richer. But it is also for this reason that fear becomes the most powerful distorting agent of time. When we are afraid, time halts in our perception. Each moment stretches infinitely. This is a survival mechanism. The brain needs time to extend to process dangerous situations. But if fear becomes a chronic state, as in prolonged anxiety or stress, life transforms into a series of heavy, exhausting hours. Science shows that stress causes the body to produce cortisol, a hormone that makes us highly alert. In short doses, it's beneficial, but if sustained long-term, cortisol destroys nerve cells in the hippocampus, where memories are stored. This means prolonged anxiety not only makes time feel heavy, but also diminishes our ability to remember well. From there, the perception of time becomes more distorted, forming a dangerous spiral. The more anxious, the poorer the memory, the more time compresses, making life feel emptier. Escaping this spiral requires rebalancing, restoring positive experiences, and living in the present instead of letting a vague future haunt us. At this point, a notion emerges. The present moment is not an abstract philosophy, but a neural mechanism. When we focus on the present, the wind, our breath, the light, the brain shifts to a different mode, reducing stress and expanding our sense of time. The present becomes a haven, a safe zone between the torrents of past and future. Living in the present also means we regain mastery over time, instead of letting the past dominate memory or the future cast a shadow of anxiety. We bring time back to this moment, the only place we truly exist. This not only brings peace, but also helps time become richer and denser. Another factor shaping our perception of time is attention. Where we place our attention, their time becomes alive. When we are absorbed in a task, the clock may seem to run fast to our eyes, but memory stores many details, making that time seem longer when recalled later. Conversely, when we let our consciousness wander, we feel time dragging endlessly, yet it leaves no memories. Therefore, the secret to living more isn't to prolong lifespan, but to prolong experience by directing our attention. Each time we fully focus, we are doubling, even tripling our time. That's why artists, scientists, or athletes often describe a state of flow. They lose track of time passing, but in reality, they are living densely in each moment. In contrast, boredom shrinks lived time. While experiencing it, boredom makes each minute feel endless. But looking back, memory has nothing to store, making that period almost disappear. This is why monotonous days of repetitive work, after many years, almost become a void in the memory of a lifetime. We often think boredom is an enemy, but it's also a signal. It reminds us that life lacks novelty, that we need a jolt to break the cycle. If we listen, boredom can become a motivation to seek new experiences, create new memories, and stretch lived time. The perception of time also differs significantly across age stages. In childhood, a year is a universe of experiences because everything is new. In adulthood, a year becomes a familiar, repetitive sequence, shortening in memory. By old age, time seems to fly. A decade can pass in the blink of an eye. All of this is not because objective time changes, but because the number of new experiences gradually decreases. But age doesn't necessarily mean short time. Those who maintain curiosity, experiment with new things, and continuously learn can still feel life as dense as when they were young. The secret isn't in the number of years we have, but in the density of experiences we pack into each year. In the modern world, busyness is often considered a sign of success, but busyness does not equate to living more. Many people cram their schedules tightly, only to remember nothing about that period later. Because when too busy, we live on autopilot, no longer paying attention. Time is compressed, becoming a vague blur. Therefore, unconscious busyness becomes a time thief more formidable than idleness. At least idleness sometimes makes us notice free moments, while endless busyness consumes life, leaving an empty memory. Here, a paradox is revealed. To have more time, we must learn to let go. Instead of racing against the clock, create space. In that space, attention returns, memory returns, and time expands. In other words, the true value of time is not in the quantity of hours we use, but in the quality of our presence. An hour lived fully can be richer than a week lived unconsciously. And that choice is humanity's greatest power over time. Once we realize that the quality of time is more important than the quantity, the big question arises: how to improve that quality? Here, cognitive science offers an interesting suggestion. Observe how the brain processes memories. The brain doesn't store time like a linear film. It only selectively chooses highlights: a distant trip, a meeting, an achievement, or even painful events. The rest is blurred out. That's why, to make life feel longer, we need to create more memorable landmarks. A year with many milestones will be remembered as a long year, while a year that passes with few events will shorten in the mind. Even small things can become highlights, as long as we attach attention and emotion to them. a sunset thoroughly observed, a deep conversation, trying a new dish. The key is not the magnitude of the event, but the mindfulness with which we live it. In the flow of time, the feeling of lacking time often stems from a deeper cause, a disharmony between what we are doing and what we consider meaningful. If we are constantly busy with things not connected to our self-worth, whether our schedule is empty or full, we still feel robbed of time. Conversely, when we live true to our values, even hardship becomes enriching. Many believe that high productivity is the key to conquering time, but the truth is more complex. Productivity is only meaningful when it serves a meaningful goal. Otherwise, it only makes us travel faster down a meaningless path, and at the end of the journey, we realize we have missed out on life itself. The synchronization between our inner rhythm and the outside world becomes a crucial factor. If we live against our biological rhythm, like working long nights and sleeping during the day, our body and mind quickly deplete. Research shows that night shift workers have a higher risk of heart disease, mental disorders, and even reduced lifespan. This is not just a health issue, but also how we perceive time. A day that upsets the biological rhythm makes each hour feel twice as heavy. This leads to the conclusion: to live longer, we need to pay attention not only to what we do, but also when we do it. Work, rest, creativity, relaxation all need to harmonize with our natural biological rhythms. Time is not a straight line outside us, but a rhythm we can play with. In fact, every culture has sought to integrate human life rhythms with natural rhythms. Festivals, seasons, religious rituals all form a system that helps individuals feel connected to a larger time. In modern society, when many of these rhythms disappear, we easily feel lost, as if life is just a soulless ticking clock. Modern science, through a strange loop, leads us back to ancient wisdom. To live more fully, we need to re-establish rhythms: a meal at a regular time, deep sleep, a balanced day of work, and proper rest. Seemingly simple, these are the keys to expanding live time. From this perspective, time is no longer an enemy but a partner. It is both strict and generous. It rewards mindfulness and punishes negligence. It shortens unconscious life but endlessly expands meaningful life, and the power of choice belongs to us in every moment. To fully grasp the fluidity of time, we need to understand a fundamental truth. Time is never lacking, only our attention is scattered. The more we get caught up in distraction, the more we feel life slipping through our fingers. And when we lose control of our attention, we also lose control of time. Neuroscientific studies show that during moments when we lose ourselves in vague thoughts, the brain operates as if it's asleep. It doesn't create new memories, nor does it increase the sensation of being alive. This explains why a day lived unconsciously completely vanishes from memory, leaving us with the feeling that time has been stolen. Conversely, mindfulness transforms moments into eternity. When we are fully present, every second is clearly etched, becoming a dense part of memory. At this level, time is no longer measured by clocks, but by the degree of our awareness. Science also confirms an important point. Memory and emotion are always intertwined. What we remember longest is not what happens regularly, but what carries strong emotions. It could be unexpected joy, fear, elation, or even sadness. Thanks to emotion, that time is deeply etched into memory, making life feel longer. Therefore, to expand time, we need to live a rich emotional life, not by chasing continuous drama or stimulation, but by nurturing sensitivity to every small shift in daily life. When we learn to listen to our emotions, even an ordinary day can become an epic song. Here, a paradox emerges. It is the very limitation of time that makes it precious. If time were infinite, we would lose the ability to cherish it. Death, instead of being a destroyer, becomes the gatekeeper, reminding us that each moment is unrepeatable, and it is this finitude that makes every second absolute. That is also why, when facing death, many people suddenly see life more clearly than ever. They realize what they lacked was not more years, but presence in each passing year. And that awareness can come to anyone, not necessarily only at the end of life. All that the science of time ultimately wants to convey comes back to one point. We can double, even triple, our lives if we know how to live with attention, emotion, and rhythm. Objective time does not change, but subjective time, what we truly experience, can be expanded infinitely. If there is a secret of time, this is it. Each moment is a door. Step into it unconsciously and we lose everything. Step into it mindfully and we possess eternity. Part 3. What is time? The journey to Jamaica began with a simple curiosity. Is there a universal clock for the entire cosmos, a single timepiece unswayed by any circumstance? In our imagination, there seems to be a universal pulse, a standard time that transcends all differences. But delving into specific experiences, we realize that even clocks are products of their conditions. In Jamaica, the sunrise and sunset are vastly different from Europe. Biological rhythms and social customs shape a completely different perception of time. This raises the question, does an absolute, uniformly flowing river of time truly exist everywhere? Science once affirmed it could. For centuries, time was seen as a solid foundation, flowing steadily like a ceaseless river. Newton posited this image, an absolute time, independent of all objects and events. But the 20th century challenged this belief. Einstein's special theory of relativity abolished the notion of a common clock for the entire universe. Instead, each frame of reference has its own rhythm. Each observer carries an inexchangeable clock. This idea was shocking because it contradicted everyday intuition. But imagine a light clock. If light travels between two mirrors, creating beats like a clock's hands, what happens when that entire apparatus moves at high speed? To a stationary observer, the light beam must travel a longer, diagonal path to hit the mirror, meaning the beats slow down, the moving clock runs slower. And this isn't just a thought experiment. It has been proven by countless experiments, from subatomic particles moving in accelerators to atomic clocks placed on jet airplanes. This leads to a paradox. If you journey with a friend on a spaceship traveling near the speed of light, upon returning to Earth, you would find yourself younger than those who stayed behind. Time has dilated with speed, and this slowing isn't an illusion. It truly alters how physical processes unfold, from heartbeats to particle decay. If we continue this line of reasoning, we immediately see that even the direction of travel makes a difference. When we move eastward, in the direction of Earth's rotation, we glide faster through space, and our clocks slow down slightly. Conversely, if we move westward, we are seemingly moving against that rotation, and our clocks will run faster. Of course, the difference is minuscule but precise enough to be measured by accurate instruments. This means that at a microscopic level, we don't just move through space, but also shape the speed at which time flows around us. Another layer of meaning appears when we change altitude. A clock placed on a mountaintop does not run the same as a clock in the valley below. Here, gravity enters the game. Einstein's general theory of relativity shows that gravity bends spacetime, and the closer to a gravitational center, the slower time flows. A pilot who lives their entire life at high altitudes will, according to their biological clock, age faster than someone living on the ground. This was once considered a paradox, but it has now become a fundamental fact. The Global Positioning System, GPS, must constantly calibrate the clocks on its satellites to compensate for errors caused by time dilation due to both speed and gravity. Otherwise, maps would be off by kilometers in just one day. From this, we are forced to accept that the concept of a common present for everyone is an illusion. For two observers at different points, events can occur in different orders. What one person calls now, another might consider before or after. Thus, the linear flow we are accustomed to exists only within the scope of everyday experience. The universe, when closely examined, does not adhere to any single shared timetable. But if so, why do we still perceive a distinct arrow of time? A broken cup only falls to the floor and never spontaneously reassembles itself. Here, we enter the world of thermodynamics. Entropy, a measure of disorder, can only increase. The universe began in an extremely ordered state, and since then, all processes lead to greater disorder. This asymmetry creates a one-way sensation for time. From a shattered teacup to an expanding universe, the arrow points towards increasing entropy. The deeper we go, the more we reach the limits of perception. When time shrinks to a scale of 1043 seconds, known as Planck time, the entire concept of space and time collapses. There, familiar laws of physics no longer apply. We cannot say what happens before or after. This is not merely a measurement problem, but a limit of the very structure of reality. And at this ultimate point, a new possibility is revealed. If time is no longer an objective flow, then what we call passing is merely the way our minds organize the world. Time may just be an illusion, a tool for us to navigate chaos, rather than an invisible thread binding all things. The next question is, if time can expand and contract depending on velocity or gravitational fields, what is its true nature? Is time merely an incidental property of space, an additional axis for us to describe movement, or is time an independent entity existing in parallel with matter? When Einstein introduced relativity, he unified space and time into a single, unified structure, spacetime. In this structure, every event has its place, like points on a giant fabric. The expansion of the universe, the movement of planets, even the smallest fluctuations of subatomic particles are lines drawn on this fabric. And if viewed this way, the flow of time we perceive is simply consciousness tracing a path among countless possibilities. However, this idea leads to an uncomfortable paradox. If all events are already laid out in the spacetime structure, from past to future, then where is free will? Is life merely a pre-filmed movie and we simply experience each frame in sequence? This question is unavoidable because once time is seen as another spatial dimension, the distinction between happening now and will happen loses its absoluteness. To escape this impasse, many scientists turn to quantum mechanics. At the microscopic level, the world does not operate like a predetermined machine. Particles do not have definite positions and velocities, but exist as probabilities. An event only becomes real when observed or interacted with. Some argue that this indeterminacy opens up space for freedom. However, quantum mechanics further destabilizes the concept of time. In its fundamental equations, time no longer plays a prominent role. It appears only as an external parameter, not an essential component. This leads to a bizarre prospect. Perhaps at the deepest level, time does not exist. The world is merely a network of relationships, and what we call before or after are just conventions arising from macroscopic experience. When physicists try to reconcile relativity with quantum mechanics, the goal of a theory of quantum gravity, the notion of time, is even more intensely challenged. There are equations that describe the universe in which time completely disappears. The reader might find this hard to believe, but imagine this. We observe a movie with characters in it. To them, time is real. Each moment follows the next. Events occur in a sequence. But to an outside observer, all the frames are already on the film reel. The characters don't know that their entire destiny has been recorded. The universe might be similar. Still, the core question remains. If time is merely an illusion, why does it affect us so profoundly? Why do we age? Why do all things decay? Part of the answer lies in entropy. The second law of thermodynamics asserts that all closed systems tend toward greater disorder. This increase in entropy creates the irreversible arrow of time. Even if fundamental equations do not distinguish past from future, in reality, no one sees broken glass reassemble itself into a cup. Additionally, the human mind contributes to reinforcing the illusion of flow. The brain doesn't just record events, it arranges them into an order. Memory compels us to perceive life as a linear sequence, and because memory always accumulates backward, we cannot escape the feeling that we are moving forward. This constraint makes time an inseparable subjective experience, even if at a physical level it might be illusory. From here, a new perspective emerges. Perhaps time is not a thread woven through every particle and event, but a loom created by our minds to understand the world. This makes us uneasy, but also suggests a strange power. If time is a product of perception, then the way we experience it can be entirely changed. One of modern physics' greatest challenges is to connect two theoretical systems: Einstein's general theory of relativity, which describes the universe on a colossal scale, and quantum mechanics, which explains the world at the level of tiny particles. Both are correct within their own domains, but contradict each other when applied simultaneously. And it is at this intersection that the question of time becomes most thorny in the quantum world. The concept of temporal order becomes vague. Fundamental particles can exist in superposition, where multiple possibilities coexist simultaneously. Only upon observation does one outcome become real. But this forces us to ask, before being observed, what is the particle's time? Is there a before and after in a probabilistic world? Many researchers suggest that this indeterminacy implies that time is no longer a continuous flow, but a collection of discrete steps, like individual frames in a film. If true, what we perceive as continuous flow is merely the smoothness of perception, while reality itself might be a series of discontinuous jumps. Another hypothesis suggests that space and time are not fundamental but emerge from more basic entities. Perhaps at the deepest level, the universe is composed of relationships, junctions of information, like a linked network. From this network, space, time, and even matter are merely constructs, like a three-dimensional illusion in a light show. Alongside these theories, the concept of entropy remains a cornerstone. As all events gradually move towards a state of greater disorder, we feel an irreversible flow. Heat dissipates, houses crumble, bodies weaken, all move in one direction. This asymmetry gives time its arrow. And while many fundamental physical equations remain time-symmetric, our everyday reality is always governed by the law of entropy. From this arises a startling truth. The arrow of time we perceive, instead of being a property of the universe, might only be a consequence of the human perspective. Because we are living beings in open systems, constantly consuming energy and producing chaos, our experience of time is intrinsically linked to the flow of entropy. Without this increase in disorder, perhaps we would not be able to perceive the past as different from the future. And this forces us to confront an even deeper paradox. If time is merely a product of entropy and perception, what happens when the universe reaches its final thermodynamic equilibrium, what cosmologists call heat death? At that point, there will be no distinction between order and chaos, no process can occur. Time, in the sense we understand it, will also disappear. The universe will become an endless, silent sea. Thinking about it sends shivers down our spines. All of history, every joy and sorrow, everything that has and will happen, will ultimately move towards absolute silence. And in that scenario, time suddenly reveals its true nature, not an eternal entity, but a finite stage of the universe. Yet, what astonishes us is that it is precisely this finitude that makes every moment of life precious. If time never ended, perhaps we would never know the value of an hour, a day. Cosmic death, like individual death, is not just an end, but a mirror reflecting the value of the present at a deeper level. Physicists and philosophers are beginning to agree on one point. The so-called flow of time is not an objective characteristic of the world, but a construct of consciousness. We are dreamers, viewing the universe through a linear lens. And once we understand that, we are forced to confront a paradoxical truth. Time both does not exist and is the only thing we have. The deeper scientists delve into the nature of time, the more they discover that the way we experience reality shapes its very concept. The brain not only registers a flow of events, but actively constructs the notions of before and after, of cause and effect. Thanks to this, we can live in an ordered world instead of chaos. But this order may only be a temporary arrangement that consciousness constructs to help us navigate. Neuroscientific experiments show that when the brain processes stimuli, it often delays for a few milliseconds before piecing them together into a seamless picture. This means that the present experience we believe is happening instantaneously is actually always the recent past. The present itself, in an absolute sense, can never be touched. This fundamentally shakes our belief in the certainty of now. Even the memories we store of the past are not intact films. They are like mosaics that the brain continuously edits and recreates. Each time we recall a memory, it is slightly altered, added to, or subtracted from. And so, the past we cling to is ultimately a construction, no longer the reality it once was. From this, a question arises. If the present is an illusion and the past is a fiction, what creates the flow of time within us? The answer lies in anticipation. It is the ability to look towards the future, to imagine it, to prepare for it, that creates the experience of continuous flow. When we stop anticipating, time within us also stops. This explains why, in states of depression, when people lose the ability to hope, they also lose their sense of time. Another discovery that surprises us is that in some special states of consciousness, the perception of time can be completely reversed. Those who meditate deeply or have near-death experiences often report transcending the flow of time, where all events occur simultaneously. There is no before or after, only a complete presence. These experiences, though difficult to verify scientifically, open up another perspective. Perhaps the flow of time is not essential, but merely a way the normal mind operates. Eastern philosophy has long emphasized this aspect. Buddhism views time as an illusion, where all phenomena arise and cease in an instant, and the eternal present is the true reality. The metaphor of a drop of water falling into a river. The moment it touches, it is both itself and dissolves into the whole. This integration shows that time only exists when we cling to separation. From a Western perspective, Augustine once confessed that he knew what time was when no one asked him, but when he had to define it, he was utterly confused. This remains true today. We perceive time every moment, but when we try to grasp it, it slips through our fingers. It is neither an object nor energy, but the framework for all things to exist. But does that framework exist objectively, or is it merely a product of the mind? In these debates, one thing is evident. Humans cannot live without the concept of time, whether it is an illusion or a reality. It remains the red thread connecting our experiences. And the paradox is that it is precisely when we understand that time might only be a product of consciousness that we see more clearly our power to shape it. If time is a construct, then we can construct it differently. We can slow down by being mindful or lengthen our lives by expanding our experiences. We don't need to change the universe, only how we see and feel. So ultimately, what is time? On one hand, it is the ceaseless operation of the physical world, of entropy of an expanding universe. On the other hand, it is a structure built by consciousness, where past, present, and future intertwine. And in that overlap, human life appears as a song that is both finite and infinite. When science sought to measure time, they discovered that the very tools of measurement define the experience. Sundials, hourglasses, mechanical clocks, then atomic clocks. All of them not only helped us divide time, but also changed how humans lived. When mechanical clocks appeared in medieval monasteries, they created an invisible revolution. Prayer times, labor, and rest were rigidly fixed. From then on, time became a unit of discipline, forcing people to comply. Today, atomic clocks allow us to determine time down to a billionth of a second, but in return, we fall into a harsh dependence. Every appointment, flight, and financial transaction is anchored to this absolute precision. We no longer live by the sunrise or seasons, but by the blinking second hand. The more precise it becomes, the more alien, rigid, and distant time feels from the natural rhythms of life. Yet at the physical level, the very notion of temporal order is not absolute. Einstein's theory of relativity shows that time slows down or speeds up depending on the speed of motion and gravitational force. This means there is no single universal clock for all. Each person, each planet, each light particle carries its own flow of time. Even more paradoxically, quantum physics reveals another truth. At the microscopic scale, past and future are no longer clearly distinct. Fundamental particles can exist in a state of superposition where they are both here and there, both having happened and not yet happened, only collapsing into reality upon observation. This raises the question of whether time truly flows or is merely an illusion created by observation. In cosmological theories, some scientists even suggest that time may not exist at the most fundamental level. It only emerges as a property when particles and energy arrange themselves into complex order. If so, time is not a foundation, but merely a byproduct of the universe's operation. However, for humans, these debates do not alter the truth. We still live in the perception of day and night, of youth and old age. Whether time is an illusion or a reality, it still determines our destiny. Therefore, the greatest fear is not in failing to understand time, but in losing it. This obsession is ingrained in human language. We spend time, save time, waste time, as if it were a currency. This comparison reflects how modern society views time as a scarce resource, even more valuable than gold. But unlike money, time cannot be accumulated, borrowed, or returned. Every moment that passes is forever lost. Ironically, the more we treat time as wealth, the more stressed we become by the fear of loss. People meticulously plan, note every task in their calendars, use reminders not to miss anything. And in their efforts to manage time, they lose the natural spontaneity of life. The clock becomes the master, and we become its slaves. But within this also lies an opportunity. If we change our perspective, we can transform time from a tyrant into an ally. Instead of calculating, we can learn to feel. Instead of forcing, we can learn to harmonize. Then, time will no longer be a cold, passing entity, but a flow that carries us into maturity and experience. This means the core lesson is not about adding more time, but about living correctly within it. Science can measure, physics can debate, but each person must define for themselves how they want to journey through that flow. Looking back at humanity's journey, we see that all human culture is an effort to cope with the finitude of time. Myths arose to explain death and promise immortality. Religions built eternal realms where souls continue to exist after the body dissolves. Science seeks to prolong lifespan, delay aging, dreaming of biological immortality. But at a deeper level, all are reactions to the fear of losing time within each individual. This is expressed through the desire to leave a mark. Artists create works, parents leave behind children, the powerful erect monuments and write histories, all wanting to transcend their brief limits through a form of extended memory. This shows that the fear of death is not just a fear of nothingness, but also a fear of being erased from humanity's stream of memory. And memory, once again, becomes the bridge between finite time and the feeling of eternity. Memory transforms a short human life into a coherent, meaningful story. Thanks to memory, we can relive a lost moment, making it exist longer than its physical reality. In that sense, memory is the only form of immortality we truly possess. But memory is also fragile. It is distorted by emotion, blurred by time, reconstructed each time we recall. That truth can make us uneasy, but it also opens up a freedom. We can recreate our lives by reconstructing our memories. This does not make time longer, but makes it richer in meaning. The final paradox the book wishes to present is that we cannot defeat time by accumulating or fighting it, but only by living within it. This means letting go of the illusion of absolute control, accepting finitude as part of the game, and savoring each moment. If the clock is a great product of civilization, then knowing when to stop looking at the clock is also a great art. That is when we stop being obsessed by flashing numbers and let our breath, heartbeat, and the natural flow of life guide us. In those moments, time is no longer a threat but a companion. Science, with all its precision and data, can explain neural mechanisms, physical structures, or cosmic calculations, but there is one thing it cannot measure: the feeling of living. It is that feeling that determines how much time we truly possessed in life. One person can live 80 years and find their life short, while another lives only 30 years but feels their life brimming, because each day was experienced deeply. So the ultimate question is not how much time we have, but how we live within that allotted time. The secret of time lies in the fact that it is not external to us, but in how we see, feel, and live. And that is the only thing we can hold in our hands. If one day we are forced to let go of everything, perhaps what remains is not the number of years that have passed, but the moments we were truly present. And then, we realize that time is not a thief, but the one who gave us the sole gift, the gift of life.